Hi, I'm Bill Corcoran Jr., and I'm your host for the On the Stacks podcast. Today, I'm chatting with Tracey Selingo, founder and chair of Fork Over Love. What's up, podcast? Episode 61 of the On the Stacks podcast in the Blue Door studio. Welcome to the podcast, Tracey. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Well rested, from what I heard.
Well rested. Yep, about 3 hours sleep from last night. So
you're ready to go.
I'm ready to go. I probably will fumble a little, but that's okay.
Everyone fumbles. So, by the way, before we start, I just have to say, I love the logo and the branding of Fork Over Love.
Thank you so much.
I really do. It's just very welcoming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was the point.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a lot about Fork Over Love in a little bit, but before we do, I understand you have an extensive background in advertising and marketing and design. So let's start there. Tell me a little bit about some of your experiences.
Okay. So I started as a copywriter back in the early 90s. I started my career in New York and spent about 2.5 years there, and then moved on to Philadelphia, still as a copywriter. And from Philly, moved to Collegeville. Just kept moving myself back home. I was born and raised in northeastern Pennsylvania. So after Collegeville, moved back here. And that was when I started my own agency and had to learn graphic design by fire. So all those hours of sitting over an art director's shoulder in a bullpen started to pay off. And I started my own agency here in the early 2000s when I was raising my boys. And just did marketing for a long time. Worked with a lot of different clients in a lot of different industries.
So you did some copywriting. What were some of the things that you did?
I worked on the Max Factor International business for Procter & Gamble. I also worked on another one of their brands that was based in Japan, believe it or not. That was kind of crazy. That was right out of the gate. So that's what I cut my teeth on.
Like when you were fresh out of college?
Fresh out of grad school. So I went to the Newhouse School for advertising. And then from there I went to New York. And that was a job that I landed. I was in a small boutique agency that was run by 4 women. We were on West 57th Street in Manhattan, and it was just an amazing experience.
What did you learn?
I learned that I didn't like Manhattan as a place to live in. But I really learned a lot about what it took to be in the business. You just you had to know so many different things, like learning all the different types of businesses so that you could effectively market them was kind of crazy. That was mind-boggling, because Procter & Gamble was like my primary brand that I worked on, but there were so many other things that we had to do. And it was just incredibly fast-paced. Deadlines were crazy. The hours were insane. So it was really like I learned that you really had to be dedicated and you really had to put your time in for it. And then I left.
So you left New York, went to Philly.
I did. I went to Philly, and then I worked for an agency with 4 guys that was run by 4 guys.
So it was complete opposite.
Complete opposite, and much, much smaller. So that agency was based in Manayunk, and we worked on the 76ers. We worked on Her Foods. We worked on Independence Brewery, SmithKline Beecham Clinical Labs. So it was that was crazy because I went from in New York, primarily working in health and beauty, and then came to Philadelphia, and it was like all these completely different brands that the guys really loved, right? Like basketball, beer, not to stereotype them.
but it's fun.
Yeah, it's totally fun. And that agency was super small, so there were less than 10. I think there were 8 of us when I joined. So that was really we were doing everything. And that was a great experience too.
What were some of the things you've done? What were some projects you worked on? Maybe one of your favorites.
One of my favorites. I'd have to say one of my favorites was when we worked on the 76ers. That and the brewing company. So the 76ers we did business to business pieces for, just to sell marketing. And then the brewery, though, that I have to say that was probably my favorite. Now that I'm thinking about it, we did a lot of radio scripts for them, and it was just so fun to have to write radio. That wasn't something that I had done in New York, and we had a lot of leeway just to make it engaging.
Yeah.
Yeah. The brand was really good. Like they weren't always able to get their stuff in print or on the air because we were just able to push it. And that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
It's totally exciting, especially when you're in your 20s, right? Like it was the right time to be there. Manayunk was a great city to be in. And it was just so many fun things to work on.
What did you like better, working for the firm in Manhattan with the all females or the all male company in Manayunk?
Wow, that is a really difficult question because the experiences were completely night and day. I'd have to say probably Philly. Yeah, it just felt more homey. Manhattan's much more cutthroat, and I just didn't have a good living experience when I was there. I was in an apartment that was broken into 3 times, so it was kind of like, I think something's telling me to leave. Like, I think it's time to go, because I was in a really nice neighborhood. It's not like I was in a horrible neighborhood, and that was to be expected. It was always like, my God, it was hard.
Yeah,
it was really hard, and it was hard because that was my first job out. And so pay-wise, it wasn't good either. So Manhattan's great. I love to go back now. And I used to say, I'm going to love to come back here someday and visit and be a tourist.
It's fun to visit, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, like I would be running to work and running because I couldn't necessarily afford the subway or any other means to get there. And just looking at all the tourists, and it would be like, oh my God, I want to come back and do that.
I just want to be them.
Yeah. And so in Philly, it was a lot more relaxed, and it was easier to live there. And I have to say, the guys were more fun.
Yeah?
Yeah, the guys were more fun.
Beer and basketball.
Basketball. We used to do brainstorming at the bar that was right across the street. So we would go over there, and that's where we would work on our pitches. And it was just, nobody cared. It was just a really good time.
Wow. What years were this that you worked in Philly?
I was in Philly 94 to 96 ish. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, funny story. I don't know if you know, but we actually do printing here for the 76ers.
I didn't know that.
We do.
See?
It's
This is the small world. It
weird.
all comes around.
It does. Yeah. Who would ever have thought?
That is great.
Yeah, it was actually one of my first clients when I first came into the family business here.
Wow.
Kind of a little bit of luck, a little bit of good timing, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, we've been doing printing for them for probably about 9 years now.
Do you go to the games?
I did at one point. Obviously, the last year there's been no games in person. But yeah, I've gone to quite a few. I've gone to more basketball games in the last 9 years than I ever have in my whole life. But yeah, it's fun. It's exciting.
That's awesome.
So what brought you back to NEPA?
What brought me back? That's a good question. Babysitters brought me back. So my husband and I, we moved from Manayunk out to, well, he didn't. I moved from the Manayunk area out to Harleysville when we got married. He's a lawyer. He had transferred through his firm to Bethlehem, and we both commuted at that point. I then changed jobs, went to Collegeville, got pregnant, and we looked at each other and said, all the babysitters are back in Northeastern PA. And we really thought too about what it would be like to still work and raise children in that area. And we just didn't want to do it. We weren't up for it. So we moved back. I continued to, at that time we called it telecommuting, not to date myself, telecommute it for the agency that was in Collegeville, and he reestablished himself here and then eventually started his own practice. Okay.
Very cool. So also before you came in today, I was reading a little bit on your website, themorningchannel.com.
Okay.
And, the one article you wrote, there was, something about 10 years ago in your life, you wrote that you were unhappy, with this time in your life. And I think the one thing that stood out to me was the word intuition. Can you talk a little bit about that and how it got you to where you are today?
Absolutely. So, what this business is like, what advertising and marketing is like. It's just, you're always busy. Everything's deadline driven. And I think a lot of times you can get lost in that. And so when I started my agency here and had my kids came to my meetings with me. Like, I worked with really wonderful people who allowed that to happen, but my boys have been to more business meetings.
Well, it's funny. My dad actually told me that they used to come here.
Yes, see that?
So it's real.
It is real. They were in tow at all times. So, I was just pushing and doing that, and not happy, like completely like, what am I doing? This is sort of crazy. They would, when they were really little, they would be napping and I would be doing work. Then they'd go to sleep at 7. For the longest time, my kids went to bed at 7:00 because I had to work, like probably at an age where maybe I shouldn't have been shoving them in bed at 7:00. Right? They're like, really? I'm like, yep, you gotta go.
Come on, Mom.
You gotta go. So I don't know exactly what happened, but I just hit the breaking point, and I was like, you know what? This is just not working anymore, and something has to give. And so I stopped. My husband was just like, you know what? Just chill for a little bit. And that was probably one of the hardest points in my life. Because when you're trying to do all of that and then you stop, which I think is what a lot of people are experiencing right now because of the pandemic, but we'll get to that. You hit a point where like it's hard to figure out who you are. At least I did. That's where I was. And so I had a friend who had said to me, you should really just start writing. So again, it took me back to not copywriting, but writing in general. And I started a blog called Twisted Pinky back then. And I didn't know what to write about. So I thought, I'll write one promise a day to myself and see what happens. And so I did this for a while, and eventually started a blog. And then from the blog, started to put the promises up on Facebook, even though I didn't even know what I was doing on Facebook. I still don't know what I'm doing on Facebook, but I didn't know what I was doing. But I was publishing one post a day, right?
And it was what? Just something positive?
It was one positive statement. I actually still do this through the morning channel. One little positive line. And what I noticed was that if I wrote about, let's say, running into a toxic person, that would happen. And like little by little, I was like, oh my God, I just wrote about this and this happened. And I really noticed it more on the negative end than I did on the positive end. So it was like, if I wrote about having a good day and I had a good day, like there was really nothing that sort of hit me over the head. But when I wrote about something negative and that negative thing happened, I was like, oh, I need to change what I'm writing about here. And I wasn't aware of the law of attraction. I wasn't in that zone of, thoughts become things.
So was it more like you were kind of journaling, or?
Pretty much. Okay. To myself. Honestly, I didn't care who was reading it. It was for me, and it was something that was able to anchor me. And from there, doors just started to open. I started to just follow whatever interested me. And so also worth noting, started doing marketing again during this time. So it all sort of came back, but my head stayed in this zone of I'll take a couple spiritual classes online. I didn't even know what I was doing or why. I was just following breadcrumbs, if you want, or threads. I don't even know. I just reached this point where I was in one class on energy clearing, and kind of realized I was a medium. And so at that point, every door started to fling open, and I started to learn so much more about intuition, just trying to understand what was going on for myself. And the interesting thing is that the stuff that was going on was stuff that was going on my entire life. I just didn't have language to put to it. Places where ideas come from, getting lost in that zone of meditative space, hearing things, right, as a medium, seeing things, knowing things about people the minute I would meet them, or just having conversations that were really, really interesting and in tune. And it was suddenly it really was just discovering the language behind it. Oh, mediumship. Okay. Oh, intuition. Got it. One thing I did was I started branching off and offering my own courses on intuition. And so one of the first courses that I offered was called the Field Trip. And I ran the field trip for 3 years. And it was a class that was devoted to teaching people about their intuition, because I was so taken back that like I didn't understand enough about my intuition that at 40, not to sound cliche, it was suddenly making sense to me, that I just wanted to share it with people. So I ran this class. It was a 365 days. I would take 12 people a year, whoever signed up, and we would explore intuition. I would help them define it. I would help them understand what their intuition meant to them. For me, I'm fire on all channels, so I see, hear, and understand things, and I would help them develop it. So I spent a long time doing that.
What was the thing that you probably learned the most about yourself during all that?
Oh, how long do we have?
We got a while still. If it's too long, I'll cut you off.
I guess understanding where my creativity comes from, how to work with it, how to trust it. I'd probably say trust more than anything, right? Because I think that everybody has these moments, I'll say on a daily basis.
Like moments of doubt?
Moments of doubt, and also moments of knowing. Like I'd rather focus on the moments of knowing, right? Of, it just doesn't seem right. And then there's the 50 things that you say to yourself after that to talk yourself out of knowing what you know. And so it's like, no, you can trust that, right? So understanding where this information comes in for you and how it comes in and what you then need to do with it. Because that part of it, that trusting yourself, and I'm no expert. I still reach this point every day where I'm like, can I trust that? Yes, I can trust that, right? I think for me, that was one of the biggest things, because then everything follows from that. If you trust yourself, you can then advocate for yourself. You can voice for yourself. You can start to examine things like your beliefs and your understandings and figure out where they've come from, because 9 times out of 10, they're not yours, right? So it's all just like coming back to yourself all the time. And the place where that lands you is a sense of value and a sense of purpose, which I think everybody's always searching for.
What is your purpose?
I think my purpose is to really help people understand that love is currency. And I don't mean love like, sometimes I don't even like to use that word because of what people think about it. It's just this human connection. It's understanding one another, seeing one another, finding compassion, having that for yourself. It's not easy. None of that's easy. And I'm starting to think it could change tomorrow, but I'm starting to think that that's it. And that's where I fit in here and now.
And this probably leads to Fork Over Love.
It's probably a good time to talk about Fork Over Love.
It's a good transition, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about Fork Over Love. How and why did you start it?
So I started Fork Over Love. The short story is I started Fork Over Love because I asked for a sign as to whether or not I should. I started it because I think during the time of isolation that we were all in, I was cooking a lot, and I was in the kitchen an awful lot. And I just kept thinking, it's so crazy to me. I'd open up the paper every day and see that another restaurant is going out of business in our area. And I would see, just the stats on unemployment, and furloughs, and everything else. And I couldn't understand. I mean, it seems simple to me now, and it seems stupid to even say it, but I couldn't understand why those two things couldn't come together. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. All these kitchens are closing, and and there's so much food, and we're not getting food to the people who need it, and the level of stress and anxiety and everything else, which I felt just from being in my home, And so so I had this nudge, I guess, and it wouldn't go away. And I talked about it a little bit in August with a friend of mine, Father Tom O'Hara. And I said, doesn't this seem crazy? We were having wine one night for dinner, and not wine. We weren't, I should correct that. We weren't having wine for dinner, but we were having wine with dinner. And I had said that to him, and he said, oh yeah, I just need to reallocate your resources. And I thought, oh yeah, I don't know anything about restaurants, and I don't really know anything about food insecurity and nonprofits, and it just seemed really overwhelming to me. So I tabled it, and the restaurants were back at it, and everyone was having dinner in tents, and it seemed like, okay, I could just keep doing what I'm doing. And the question came back in the fall and in December, especially. And I was having a conversation with my husband one night about it. And I said, I don't know why somebody hasn't figured this out yet. And he just looked at me and he said, well, I think maybe it's yours to figure out. And I was like, oh my God, no, no. So that was, I can tell you, that was December 23rd. And I went to bed that night and I said, okay, like as you can tell, I mean, it was really bothering me. It was like I felt like I was being chased by this question. And so as I was nodding off to sleep, I just made a deal with the universe. And I said, if you can give me an unmistakable sign first thing in the morning, preferably before my feet hit the ground, I'll do it. I'll figure out a way. I'll make it happen. If you don't, if I've had my second cup of coffee and I don't hear from you, this is it. I'm not thinking about it anymore. I'm moving on. And so I was having my first cup of coffee and I opened up my email and there was a message from Father Tom, who I hadn't heard from in quite some time. And he said, hey, I don't know what happened, but you came into my prayer service this morning and I hope you're okay. And I just want to wish you a Merry Christmas. This is Christmas Eve now. And by the way, I want to let you know that I think there's an unmistakable, welcoming spirit inside of you. And I was like, there you have it. And honestly, I don't know why, because I've asked for signs before, but this time I was like, okay, you delivered it. I made the promise. Let's make this happen.
You got to do something.
Let's do it. Let's do it. So I got in touch with two friends, and the board was organically formed in about 3 days. We met a week later. It was just like, will you do it? Everyone I asked said yes. So there's 6 other women on the board. We have one restaurant advisor. I asked them and they nobody had to think about it, which to me is the beautiful no-brainer, right? When everyone is just saying yes and yes and yes. And it has just been an absolute whirlwind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have this, great group of women around you. Mm-hmm. What do they all do? How do they, I'm sure each one probably does something a little different, but do you want to maybe give a little shout out to some of these amazing women that you work with?
I do. I want to. So I have on the board Betty Saxton, who had just stepped down from Maternal and Family Health Services. She's the CEO there. She had just retired, and I thought, Betty would be absolutely perfect, right? She's a brilliant woman and obviously knows, oh my God, so much about this world. And I had met her several times and had dinner with her before asking her. And so she was a no-brainer. Betty, do you want to do this? She said, absolutely. And she's been fabulous. Betty has set up our whole system, which I'll talk about in a little bit. I asked Melissa Perini. Melissa and I walked, I think, every day through the pandemic. And we had talked about this idea, and I had brought the question to her a couple times, and we had gone back and forth. And so I finally called her and I said, Melissa, I'm going to do it. She was like, I'm totally in with you. Melissa is such a community advocate and has an absolute heart of gold. She too, all the women, so smart, just amazing to work with. So it's Betty and Melissa. Ruth Corcoran. So I called up Ruth, and Ruth and I've known Ruth for many, many years. Called her up, and actually I emailed Ruth. And I thought she'd be absolutely perfect because she's a former restaurant owner and a current marketer. And I don't know anyone in the world who's better at PR. Ruth immediately said yes. So she has been completely invaluable in planning the events. I mean, Ruth is up, I don't know what time in the morning, but
Early.
So her energy and her commitment to this is just, it's absolutely unbelievable. Also have Liz Graham, who's the COO at Riggs Asset Management. Known her for years too. Same thing. Liz, do you want to get involved with this? She said absolutely. And at our first meeting, stepped up to be our treasurer, which was welcome relief for me. She brings so much to the board. Her expertise is incredible. Her ability to plug in on the business aspect of it for us is fantastic. Carolyn McLaughlin-Smith. Carolyn is a senior benefits consultant at Creative Benefits. I've known her for years. Carolyn was actually the reason why I started my marketing business when I moved back to the area. She is just brilliant at business and has a heart of gold as well. She's so smart. She's the kind of person that, can sit back and she listens and she assesses, and then she's fabulous. Just shoots an arrow that you need. So she's there. And Lindsay Griffin, the COO of the Chamber of Commerce. I didn't know Lindsay. So as I was forming the board, people were like, do you know Lindsay? You should ask Lindsay. And I'm like, I don't know Lindsay. I could just go and ask her? Like, really? Okay. Because that's not like part of the way that I normally am either, right? So I reached out to Lindsay and said, I heard that you'd be fantastic for this. And she immediately plugged in, and she has been amazing. Her expertise from the chamber, obviously, is just, it's so important for us. She is so plugged into really helping on the economic development end. And she, from the get-go, just really embraced our mission. And so she's been fantastic.
So you got this great group of women.
Amazing group of women.
Amazing group.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened?
We just came together and we made this happen within 3 weeks. So we had our first board meeting January 8th, and our first event was 3 weeks later at Corpus Christi. We met. I brought the idea to them as to what I wanted to do with no solutions whatsoever. So that first meeting, I can tell you, we were sitting on those meditation cushions. I sat on that meditation cushion for a good hour before that first board meeting because I was like, oh my God, I don't know how this is going to happen. It just felt so out of the realm of everything. And I literally can tell you that I just sat back and watched them figure it out. I mean, it was probably one of the best conversations in the world. And just to watch them go back and forth, it was fantastic. So we had like what we thought was a working plan at the end of that conversation. And then from there, we set up our first pilot at Corpus Christi Church. That went very well. There were 300 people at that event. A week later, we advertised an event. Of course, we're like, keep this quiet, Ruth. We can't tell anyone. And then
it blew up.
And then we let her go for the second one. And oh my God, she did an amazing job getting the word out. And so we increased the number of meals that we distributed at that event. And we had 400 meals that went out. And we haven't stopped. So this is week 12. Tomorrow will be our 12th distribution.
So how does it work?
Okay, so it's actually super simple, which is why I don't understand why,
the simplest things sometimes are the hardest to explain.
Seriously, right? So we solicit donations from the community, and then with that money, we purchase takeout dinners from our restaurant partners. We have a little over 37 right now, and then we take those takeout dinners and we distribute them at a host site, and we have our events that are completely open to the public. So when we're distributing them at a host site, it's to the entire neighborhood. And so this is sort of like how this works for us. What we're trying to do is we're trying to keep our restaurant partners and their neighbors together, because we believe that if everybody could see how much the pandemic has sucked and how much everybody is struggling, there can be a point of connection, right? Because when we're all like in our own little world doing our own little thing, we think we're the only person in the world who's affected by everything. But when we come out, even though we're coming out at these drive-through dinners, when we come out en masse like this, people can see, and everyone is feeling loved and cared for, from the restaurant partners who are dropping their meals off, who are so grateful. They're getting paid for these meals. They're getting paid $10 per meal. We normally order up to 100 per restaurant. So we'll have 4 restaurants there with us. So they're coming, they're dropping off the food. They're like, oh my God, thank you. This is so wonderful. This is great. And then the community shows up, and some of the community is really in need. Other people from the community are coming out and they're paying their dinner forward so that they could support their neighbors. And then in the midst of all this is the host site, who has agreed to allow us to come in and do all of this. And they're just grateful to be a part too. So it's almost like, I feel everybody is so hungry for hope right now, and everybody's looking for a place to plug in. And when these people all come together, that's where the magic happens for me. That's kind of like, yes, take care of each other. And remember in a month that you were taking care of each other, right? So that, I think, is where the beauty is. And I think that's what makes us different. And that's what has helped us get the support that we have.
I think you already kind of answered it, but what is the mission?
So the mission is to change the narrative on food insecurity. The mission is to bring these two struggling groups together and recreate a system of change in a neighborhood. So we welcome everyone. We don't ask any questions. You can come and pick up 6 meals if you need 6 meals. If you're picking up for your neighborhood, you can come and pick up for your neighborhood. We're not here to judge. We don't know what's going on. We want everyone to feel the comfort, right? And so what we're thinking is that we can change this narrative. We can be like a tiny little part of this much bigger issue by bringing everybody together to the table to break bread. Eventually, we hope that this is not happening in a car line, right? Because it's kind of hard, but we see it happening already. We see that people are recognizing that that there is another way, and there is another way, and we need to create it. And so for us, it's getting people together to start to change the narrative, to start to have the conversation, to start to find the ways that we can do better, because we can. Like, we know that giving someone who's hungry one hot meal is not going to solve the problem. But by keeping everybody plugged in, that's where we have our opportunity to change things. And that takes the small local restaurants that are there. It takes everyone. It takes the host. It takes the businesses that are supporting it. It takes every person who is willing to make a $10 donation to see what a difference we can make. And we can.
Everyone, including yourself, everyone is volunteers.
Everyone.
Right?
Everyone is volunteers. No one's getting paid. No one is getting paid at all. Everyone's volunteers.
Except the restaurants.
Yes, thank you. The restaurants are definitely getting paid.
So, I mean, it's a win-win.
It's complete win-win. Like, what would happen to our area if we lost all of these small local restaurants? There's so much culture there. I mean, they are the places where we gather. They are the places where we go to celebrate, where we go to console, where we go to do business. They're really, food. It's all about food.
The connection.
They are the connection. And so supporting them, giving back to the community, keeping the community going, and finding new ways to make this happen together is just so important. So yes, 100% volunteer, 100% donation based. If you gave me $10 right now, I would tell you that is going to buy a meal tomorrow. And it is. That's what we're doing. It's hard. It's stressful, but it's so, so, so rewarding. And it's so nice to just be this place. Like I talk about us as being the space we're wherever we go, because we jump around to all these different areas. Wherever we go, we just go and we set up the container, and then we watch the neighborhood make it happen. And it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing.
I've seen a ton of pictures on social media. I've seen it in the news. My friend Chris Bohinski from PA Live, I saw him volunteering.
Oh yeah, he was there.
Shout out to Chris.
He was there.
It's really cool.
It is amazing.
So do you have maybe one or two stories? I mean, you probably can't mention names, and you probably don't even know the names or some of these people that have came, but do you have any stories of people that have just came and maybe just said thank you, like for what you're doing?
Oh, there's so many. So I have a stack of thank you notes back in my office of people. Like every week they come, and we do have a pay it forward jar, so people will drop off whatever they can. And often it comes in like a envelope that says thank you on the front of it, or there's a card. We've received some really beautiful thank you notes. I have to tell you though, and you should just come to a distribution, because just standing there and giving out the food, you can see how grateful people are. And they are. And who knows? And I say this all the time. I'm like, if you're having a bad day, come. These are amazing chef-made meals. You don't have to think about dinner. We have it covered, right? I mean, we all know the comfort of a hot meal. And so it is evident as people pull up.
How can, anyone listening, how can anyone get involved? Are you looking for volunteers?
We are always looking for volunteers. Yes, we're looking for volunteers. People can go to the website, forkoverlove.org, and they can sign up to volunteer. If you're a restaurant and you're struggling, you can just fill out, it's a really easy application. And you can fill that out just to partner with us. If you have a really nice big parking lot and about 8 folding tables, we would love to come to your place. So if you want to hold that center, if you want to be the place where we go in and create the container, you can fill out an application to be a host partner. Like, we're looking for everything all the time. And because we're doing this every single week, can you imagine? It's a lot. It's a lot. It's an event for 400 people every single week. So,
you need help.
We need a lot of help. Yeah, we do. We need a lot of help.
So you also, a little bit ago, and you brought the meditation cushions, if I'm using the right word, with you. But,
yes.
You said before you had your very first meeting, you meditated, and we meditated on the stacks today. You brought them with you.
You liked it.
Thank you for that, by the way. Very comfortable. More comfortable than the normal just sitting on stacks of paper. So,
yes.
But how has that helped you in your life, career, business?
The meditation end of it?
Yeah.
It's everything. So that's where I go to anchor. It's all about staying centered, which is very hard to do. And it is very hard to do. And I will tell you, which I think I told you this before we talked. So, 30 years in marketing, 11 years in spiritual development, that was really a rabbit hole where I feel like my head was just completely in the clouds for 11 years. And I liked it there. It's very peaceful. It's a completely different world. And so jumping out of that and coming back in to something like this has been, it's been quite the adjustment, because it's just, in many ways, it feels like coming back into this business reality. And my meditation cushion has become my best friend. Not that it wasn't before, but it's really important to me now just to take the time to anchor. So if I feel like I'm getting to a point where I am doubting myself, or I am questioning something that's going on, I literally just go and sit on the cushion. Sounds crazy. 15 minutes just to come back in. And the one question I always ask myself is that true? Is that true? Like what I'm thinking, when your head spins, it's like, woo. And then I'm like, is that true? Is that real? 9 times out of 10, it's not. It's like, oh no, that's, based in anxiety over an event when I'm looking at the weather forecast.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You know what's going to happen at that event? I'm going to get wet. Is that so bad? No, that's what meditation does. So it just comes, it helps me anchor in the same way that this food helps people anchor.
How can somebody, maybe that's listening and wants to get into meditation, if they think it can benefit them, like where does someone start?
Oh, there's so many places, especially since we've all come through the pandemic. But I would say that check out one of a million apps for meditation. Insight Timer is fantastic.
Is that what you use?
I do use it. I used it a lot in the beginning, and I don't use it as much now because now I'm like able to just
On your
most
own?
days sit on a cushion and be okay with it,
But for a beginner,
For a beginner,
like myself,
yeah, I would say to go on to something like Insight Timer. I would also say that you should just spend a tiny bit of time figuring out like where it is that you lose yourself. So what do you like to do that helps you forget about what time it is or put you in a zone?
what do I like to do? I don't know. I actually like to write. I do enjoy writing too.
So I would say that's where you start. You start with writing. So do you write every day?
I guess kind of, sort of, with this podcast thing, I'm always kind of, writing and just thinking of developing, the next piece of content, whether it's written or, audio that I'm preparing for, like today.
Right.
I'm always jotting down notes.
So I think it's in that space that you would find like sort of a sweet spot for meditation. Because it's always some outlet. And I don't want to say creative outlet, but for you, it would be a creative outlet. Like for someone who runs, it might be running. Like there's so many different ways to meditate. It is just that point where you come back into yourself and you come back into center. So I would say for you, I would journal. I would make that different from work and maybe just do a little something in the morning. Doesn't have to be anything. Could just be a page. Just pick up a pen and free write.
Just something to start.
Just free write. No edits. Just maybe 3 minutes if you wanted to give yourself 3 minutes. Because when you're starting meditation, it's helpful to just start for a tiny bit of time just so you could get into the practice of it. It's just practice. Meditation is practice every day. You're never going to get to the end of it. There's no line to cross. It's just you get up and you do it. You get up and you practice.
So what do you do?
So I do that. I write in the morning. I do a tiny bit of reading. So some form of inspirational whatever. I usually grab my roomie book and read a little poetry. And then I grab my pen and I free write. Sometimes I free write for a long time. And other times it's really difficult to get 3 sentences on the page. And that allows me to check in, like when that happens, all right, what else is going on? What am I thinking about, right? And that's like my favorite thing to do. And I walk and I do yoga, but I don't, writing has really always been it for me. So if you started there, you might be surprised.
I'll have to give it a shot.
Yeah. That's how that whole like promise thing started for me. It was like just writing one thing a day and then going back and looking at it and going, I recently went back into all of my journals.
Into the archives.
Into the archives.
What did you write?
Oh, first of all, like I
if
had.
If you're okay with sharing, I know it's a little personal.
Yeah, no, but what ends up happening when you go back into the archives is you can really see where you are at different points in time. Like I had a really hard time writing when we were going through the first shutdown. It was just my mental state. So I didn't really write that much then. I walked a lot, but it's neat to go back and see because I can see professionally where I was going. I can see personally what I was struggling with, which is interesting to go back and look at now, Was it so bad? Not really.
You made it through it?
I made it through it. I'm on the other side of it. But I was also someone who I was the person who always received journals for her birthday. And I was like, oh my God, please, with the journals, right? Never got past the maybe fifth or sixth page of the journal. And now they're stacked. My moleskins are stacked. It's just such a good place to land. It's like landing on that cushion. It's just space.
Yeah. And one of the things that it's kind of stuck in my head from earlier in the conversation is that you said you wrote down like positive thoughts that eventually came true. Mm-hmm. Do you mind sharing one?
Oh, I can honestly tell you, I wish I had my phone on me, because every single day it's something that is completely relevant to where I am. Do I have one specifically? No, because it's every single day. I'm like, how about that? I think today's that I sent out was focused your energy on what matters most. And I'm like shiny objects, right? And there was a point today where I was like, oh my God, I must come back and finish this one thing right now, And so that's how it works for me. I believe it's a conversation with the universe, because I believe it's a form of channeling when you sit and you write like that. And when you receive it, when you receive your own words, that's where the magic happens. So when I was talking before about the field trip way back when I did that, we used to end that year-long experience with a retreat. And at the retreat, I used to have the women come together and write these notes to themselves. Except I didn't tell them that. I told them that they had to come together and write a note to their best friend. And so they all did it, and they were all happy to do it. And they wrote like 12. And then I would, at the end, they'd say, okay, what should we give it to our best friend? And I'm like, no, take it home and open up one card a month for the rest of the year.
So it was really a note to themselves.
Yes. And when I tell you that at some point during the year, each and every one of them would come back to me and say, oh my God, I can't believe that. And so that to me is channeling the universe, whatever you want to call that. It's different for everyone, but that's what you're doing. You're just opening the space up to receive these messages that are there all the time, to remind you how connected you are. Because we all think we're not connected.
But we are.
But we are. We're connected to each other. We're connected at that level.
And full circle, back to Fork Over Love.
Full circle.
So how can our listeners connect with Fork Over Love online?
They need to visit forkoverlove.org, and they can just tool around the website a little bit, get a better gist of who we are and where they can plug in. It's a really simple website. They can also look and see all of the different events that we have coming up, and there'll be more listed soon. So right now we're listed up until April 7th. But we'll be at the JCC in Kingston. We'll be back in Hazleton, Plains, wilkes-barre, all over the place. So yeah, they can find an event and come. I would say the best thing to do is come to an event if you want to see what it's all about. Pick up a meal. Feel the connection that's there. It's just different. It's really different.
What's the future look like for Fork Over Love? What's the long-term plan?
The long-term plan is that we keep moving forward, and that hopefully we have a space sometime soon where all of these restaurants can still come together, but we can actually have a physical space. And I think that looks like a community kitchen where everyone is always welcome. We don't have that here yet, and I think we desperately need it. And this would be the perfect way to do it.
And you guys are also on Instagram and Facebook, right?
We are, as Fork Over Love, and we're on Twitter as Fork Over Love.
All right.
So yeah, we're in all the places,
all
right? Checking the boxes.
Yep. So give you guys a follow.
Thank you.
Yeah. Before we end, is there a message you would like to leave with our listeners about Fork Over Love?
I think I just want everyone to, to realize how important food is and what a role it plays. It's so easy to fork over love. We use that and we say that all the time, but it's like just reaching out and helping somebody understand that they're supported and they're connected and that they can be seen and that they belong is food. That is nourishment, not only as food and nourishment, but that is the nourishment that we all need. And we happen to do it by using food as our channel, with the restaurants, and also with the residents. But, just thinking about the ways that you can do that in anyone's life at any point in time. Sometimes that nourishment's a smile, and sometimes it's a meatloaf dinner.
Whatever works, right?
Whatever works.
Is there anything else before we end?
Oh, I just want to thank you for the space just to talk about this. It's always great to talk about it.
Definitely. Yeah, so
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Fork Over Love, Tracey Selingo on the Stacks podcast in the Blue Door studio. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
If you'd like to learn more about the On the Stacks podcast, be sure to search the hashtag On the Stacks on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. We'll catch you next time on the Stacks. If you'd like to learn more about the On the Stacks podcast, be sure to search the hashtag On the Stacks on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. We'll catch you next time on the Stacks.